Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Wednesday night class. Tonight we're studying Parashat Devarim, and we are studying the holy words of Shimshon Pincus. And we are starting at the beginning of the fifth book, where Moshe Rabbeinu is giving his parting words before he passes away, with indeed instructions for the Jewish people to enter how and the right way to enter the land of Israel, but most importantly, his rebuking speech. His opening statement to the Jewish people is hinting to the fact that they did commit multiple sins over the past 40 years. Let's just quickly take a look at our screen to read that first verse. It is chapter 1, verse 1 in Deuteronomy. These are the words that Moses spoke to the people on the side of the river, Bamidbar in the desert, Barava, Mosuf ben Paran ben Tofel v'Lavan v'Chatzrot Zahav, in the plain opposite the Red Sea, between Paran and Tofel, and Lavan and Chatzrot and Di Zahav. As we mentioned earlier, all 7 of these places allude to 7 different sins the Jewish people did. Again, I'll go through them quickly. Bamidbar is when they came out and they were complaining for having to come out and starve in the desert. Ba'arava, that's where they sinned with the idol worship of Baal Peor. Mosuf is when they complained, is there no graves in Egypt? Paran is where they sent the spies out. Tofel and Lavan is when they complained about the man, that they wanted something more desirable. Chatzerot is where Korach took place. Dizahav was alluding to the sin of the golden calf. And as we said earlier, Rashi tells us that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu is hinting to these sins, it was in order to preserve the honor of the Jewish people and not to embarrass them. This is Rashi. Okay. Rav Pincus now says that that's one way to understand this verse and what Moshe Rabbeinu's intention was by mentioning all these places and hinting to the sins instead of saying the sins themselves. But Rav Pincus says he has a completely different way to look at and understand what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing. And this is really nice. Look at this. The Talmud of Masechet Yevamot says that anytime we judge someone, we also have to declare their good deeds and positive aspects that they have. That's what the Talmud says. So what does that mean? That means when we're going to be judging somebody, we need to say something positive about them also. And the reason for this is because if we want the judgment or the rebuke or the criticism that's being done be most truthful and honest, we have to make sure that we mention this person's merits as well, because those good deeds and good merits also reveal to us the essence of this person that we are either judging, rebuking, or criticizing. So, for example, if a person sinned and they didn't give a poor person tzedakah, charity, when they were asked for it, we have to examine this person's deed. Is this person a person who normally gives, and this time he couldn't because he didn't have any money on him, or he was in a rush, or a health concern, whatever that may be, or he thought this guy was a thief? So then it's not such a severe deed. But if this guy never gives, he always closes, he's always holding everything to himself, and he's never giving out as God wants him to, well, then after all, that was a horrible, horrible deed. And that's just an example. For this reason, Rav Pincus says, it is imperative to mention a person's merits anytime they are being judged or rebuked. Because without knowing those merits, then the verdict will not be 100% truthful. Now, according to this, anytime we mention someone's sin, we would also have to mention an excuse why or what caused them to make that sin. Not to absolve them, Rav Pincus says, but in order to better understand and properly judge that person or properly rebuke that person for sinning, we have to mention a merit as well, or a good deed. So now when we look at the Jewish people, there was many reasons why they sinned, many excuses why they did what they did, or what caused them to sin. And again, even though there could be many reasons and causes why they sinned, that doesn't excuse them and get them, scot-free for not having to do it, to be obliged or held liable. However, it does need to be mentioned in order to understand them in order to judge them, in order to rebuke them. Now, with this chiddush, with this novelty, Rav Pincus tells us, he proposes maybe this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing, not just hinting to the Jewish people sins that they committed, but he was also hinting to what caused them to sin as well. And maybe cut them a little slack. Of course, they're liable, but cut them some slack for their sin because there was a reason, there was a cause why they sinned. So the first one, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. Yes, that's where they complained to God to Moses for leading them into the desert to starve. But Moshe is also mentioning the Jewish people's greatest merit, and that was that they followed Moses into the wilderness, into the desert. The fact that they went to a place of nothingness, of desolation, that's what caused them to complain. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Bamidbar, not only alluding to their complaining, but also alluding to what caused them to complain. Next, Ba'arava indeed was the place the Jewish people worshipped Baal Peor. They committed idolatry at the plains of Moab, yes. But here Moshe is mentioning the place they sinned because it was the place that caused them to sin. You see, it was the Moavim that enticed the Jewish people to sin. They caused them to sin. It wasn't like Rabbi Pincus says that the Jewish people were looking to worship an idol, looking to sin. No, they were forced into it against their will. What do you want them to do? If Moshe would have said Bepeor, that would have been understood as, yeah, they were looking for idolatry. But he said Ba'arava, in the plains of Moab, alluding to it's because they were there and that's what caused them to sin. Again, another excuse why they sinned, mentioning some type of a merit. Number 3, Mulsuf, when they complained when they were stuck by the sea of reeds, oh, are there not enough graves in Egypt for all of us to be buried? You have to come and bury us out here. Again, here too, Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioning, why would they ever say such an awful comment? Why would they complain so strongly? Well, it was because they were in a life-threatening situation. It wasn't their fault. They had their backs up against the sea, and that's the only reason why they would ever say such a thing. Again, an excuse to why they sinned and they complained that way. Ben Paran was alluding to the place they sent the spies out, and here we could maybe understand as follows. Chazal tell us, our sages tell us, why was this place called Paran? Because it's similar to the words Peru Urvu, be fruitful and multiply. And this was because at this point, the Jewish people had a lot of children, and they were fearful of their children's future, of the well-being of their children in the future. And so they stressed and they were scared, and they wanted to send spies for the future of their children. And it was only because of that, the natural cause, the natural desire of a parent to care about their children's future and well-being, that caused them to send the spies. So again, somewhat of an excuse why they sent the spies out. Next was Ben Tofel Vilavan, is referring to their complaint about the man. And this complaint, as the Talmud tells us, to understand it, the Talmud tells us that the Jewish people, they said to themselves, how can a human eat? How could a human being enter something and it doesn't exit? Basically, how can we be eating the man and not have to relieve ourselves? Because they didn't. So they were worried that they were going to be lifted up to such a high level, and that's scary because the higher level a person is, the more stringent their punishment is if and when they fall. So they were very worried about that, and they said, no, we don't want to be held on such a high level. We don't want to be held on this white, delicate level, right? The man was delicate and white. It was white in color, and it was these wafers, these crackers. They didn't want to be held on such a high level, and that's what the excuse was why they sinned. And dizahav means enough gold, and this is because the sin of the golden calf was only committed because they had so much gold. And because they had so much, that was the cause and the reason for their sin. So what Rav Pincus is telling us over here is that Moshe Rabbeinu was not only hinting to the sins themselves, he was also hinting to the cause of their sins, because that's a natural thing, the proper thing to do. When you rebuke, when you criticize, when you judge someone, you have to also mention their merit or mention an excuse or a cause for the sin, and that actually lightens the weight of their punishment. So just like Moshe Rabbeinu, when we do come to criticize someone, we have to obviously want to do so in the most helpful, productive way because we care about that other person. Going ahead and criticizing and rebuking people just for the sake of there's no point there. The point is to help someone. And therefore, we have to make sure that we mention to them that we understand the reason or the cause for what made them sin and express how you understand how it must have been so hard for them to hold out in such a situation. But nevertheless, it was wrong. When you come off that way, it comes off more meaningful. They come and they see, wow, you really understand me. If you just are berating your children, berating your spouse, berating your employees, your neighbor, your friend, your siblings for things that they did, they're going to look at you and they're not going to take you seriously. But if you can really think about it beforehand and say, I understand you. You did it because you did ABC because of XYZ. I get it. It's hard, but it's wrong. And this is how you should act. And this is what you should have done. Then they're going to say, wow, you really spent time to really think and understand where I'm coming from, what was going on in my mind. That's the way Moshe Rabbeinu rebuked the Jewish people. And that's the way when we need to come and rebuke or criticize someone else, we should also. I'll end off with a very important saying from or concept that Dale Carnegie teaches us, which our sages tell us as well. He says, be very, very, very slow to criticize and quick to compliment. But there are certain times where you may need to criticize someone, especially a loved one or someone that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And make sure you do it in the triple C sandwich, which means compliment, criticize, compliment. Whatever it may be, you compliment the person, and then you criticize them, and then you end it off with a compliment. They'll be susceptible. They'll be open to taking the criticism or the rebuke. If you just come down, boom, boom, boom on a person, they're just going to shut. But if you start off with a compliment, don't say the word but afterwards, because then that just uproots everything. Say the word and. You start off with a compliment, and then there's the criticism, and another compliment. They're going to be quick to taking that positive criticism and hopefully grow from it. So there's that concept. And there's also the concept here that Rav Pincus is telling us is try to understand what was going on in that person's mind or situation when they made that mistake, because then they're going to really understand that you care about them. And then if they know that you care about them, they're going to take what you're saying to heart, and then they're going to better their ways. If you're just going to rant off at someone, no, it's not going to work. If in Hebrew we say, if you're going to yored lesof da'atam, if you're going to enter their mind and understand where they came from and what their struggle was, and resonate with them. Oh, this person understands me. Of course I'll accept their criticism. They're doing it because they understand and they care about me. They're not just verbally vomiting all over me. And then by complimenting before and after the criticism, you're most likely going to help that person you're trying to give positive criticism to, opposed to just coming down on them and then be no positive consequences. So may Hashem bless us that we will be, again, slow to criticize, quick to compliment, but when we do need to criticize, to realize that we are doing so out of love for the other. And on the receiving end, we should really try to not take it personally from a loved one who's criticizing us or someone that cares about us. Rather, hopefully they're doing it with the right intentions, and then take it to heart to hopefully better our ways.